Hey, this is the Reef podcast, and we're talking in a way that you get like the real discussion that people are saying. And this is we want it to be less manufactured. So you're gonna get words that little babies, well, babies don't care because they have tiny, smooth brains, that some people at some point in their lives think are offensive. If that's something you don't like, just be warned that it's coming. We are often not gratuitous about it. Sometimes we are, but it's going to come. It's going to happen. We promise. Probably. It shouldn't be a big deal, but because some people think it is, we say this disclaimer. My name is Rich.
My name is Ben.
And today, on a very special Reef Beef, we have got Jonathan Begnaud as our guest. We will explain who Jonathan is as we go along, but we are going to be talking about all kinds of stuff. We have some beefs. We're going to be talking about all kinds of chemistry stuff and experiments that Jonathan has been doing because they're very cool. This show is sponsored by saltwateraquarium.com,
Champion Lighting and Supply,
and powered by PolypLab. This is Reef Beef. So, Jonathan.
Yep.
Who are you on the forums? People will recognize your name your fake name more than your real name.
Yeah, right. Everything I've done online in fish world, as my wife calls it, is Taricha.
Taricha. Right. Okay. So I love everything about Taricha from as soon as I was made aware of Taricha. Not just that you referenced one of the things I wrote up once, but that you were referencing things at all made my head explode and get so excited. And you also have an impossible for people who don't know how to pronounce your screen name, how to pronounce your screen name. So I think that's fantastic. So I've seen you on the forums. You've done a lot of good, what I call work. So on this show, we talk a lot about mind stories where, which is basically a hypothesis. And a lot of people stop at the mind story. So they'll see something in a paper and, that says, this coral did worse with a salt reading of 7. I'm making up things because I don't want to get confused with reality. And then people go, so our salt should be at 7. And they don't bother to read the entire paper, which says this worked like all papers do. This worked. We found this in this one example of this one thing in this one place in this one way. Don't generalize this. And everyone wants to generalize everything. So it's very cool to see other people checking the mind stories,
Right. So I would guess, and I'll jump in here and
Sure.
tell a little bit about myself and how I think about the hobby. This hobby is like a super optimistic sort of thing. Like we believe we can keep alive anything practically if we can just, figure out the right sort of magic to do. And so with all this sort of optimism, we have all these ideas about things that could work and all these ideas about how it maybe works. And we don't check a lot of them. And a lot of the things, over years are stories about things that we couldn't check. But I think now where, the hobby is and what's available to just the average hobbyist, there's a lot of things that have been mind stories passed down, if you want to think about it that way, that are totally checkable. There are things that we could actually have data on. There are things that we could actually have a good idea about whether this is something we need to hang on to or whether it's something we should have moved on from a long time ago.
Yep. And the more we went through kind of a time when there were a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there were enough people doing checks on some things. And then we hit a dry spell, I think kind of a year or two before COVID, it kind of slowed down and then COVID slowed it way down. And so it was exciting for me to find your stuff somewhere in there and go, oh my God, somebody's doing it. Yay. Because we don't need to be chasing stuff. Do you see, Ben? You see why I like Jonathan?
Yeah, the picture is becoming clearer and clearer.
Yeah. So, I guess we need to ask you the question straight away. What do you think we should be checking that as a hobby that we haven't checked? And then we'll see. That's a question. I can stop talking after the question.
That's how that works.
Okay. So So let me. Can I phrase it as a beef? Can we do that?
The
Sure.
name of the show is Reef Beef. Let's get it on.
Okay. So here's my beef, and my beef is with product claims, and but let me phrase it this way. Yes, we all know that product claims are not great, and sometimes they're terrible and completely senseless. My beef is more like with us. Like, I think we need to be better on how we think about product claims. Um, let me give you an example. I This is a short bit of dramatic reading. This is from a this is from an ammonia remover product description. Completely real. How do you keep your fish friends happy and healthy? By keeping their home clean and clear. But sometimes, even with all the love and care in the world, ammonia levels can still rise in your aquarium. That's where product comes to the rescue. With just one dose, this magic potion, yes, they literally call it a magic potion, neutralizes harmful ammonia and nitrites that can build up in your fishy's water. Plus, it also acts as a water conditioner by neutralizing pesky chlorine and chloramines. Here are some more features that make this product fantastic.
Oh God.
It's so bad. Um, and then it goes on to list things that are in a bunch of stuff that a whole bunch of other products that we think of as maybe kind of more legitimate also claim. Neutralizes ammonia and nitrites that can harm your aquatic friends. Acts as a water conditioner by kicking chlorine and chloramine to the curb, et cetera, et cetera. So go ahead.
That's you've you've hooked into the beef that kind of started the skeptical reef keeping series. It's like, oh God, but I want to hear what you have to say about it, even though we
Okay.
haven't told anybody who you are or why they should listen to you just because Rich likes you. But we'll get to that after the beefs. I want to finish. Let's finish this and we'll get to all of that stuff.
Okay. So I think reading that, you would be like really skeptical about it because it's complete nonsense. I mean, it's talking about the product literally making your fish happy. Um, but that product has the same product claims as a bunch of other products with bottles from that are used a whole lot more from more reputable product brands that make the same claims. And spoiler alert, they have the same chemicals. They're the same class of compounds in them. And so I think we need to think of all the product claims more the way we think of that ridiculous one rather than the way we sort of we might think like, okay, so this was written by a team of scientists. Like when we look at a bottle, we say, this was clearly written by a team of scientists in a lab. Or we say, this was written by lawyers who were super careful to not say anything that might be wrong and might get them in trouble.
No, I was
Yeah.
just gonna say real quick, it's the reading on that, like it's just corny. And when I think of chloramine remover, I just think of sodium thiosulfate. You don't have to say magic potion. You don't have to be corny about it. So it makes me feel like they just like, oh, we're supposed to write all this weird stuff on the bottle, and it's like, no, you don't have to.
Yeah, and that's the thing that it actually does. So this class of compounds, it actually does remove chlorine and chloramine, but it's all the other things. It's the instantly zaps your ammonia and your nitrite and nitrate and all of those sorts of things. Um, that's the stuff that no, you're on your own with all that.
Yeah. And you see, Ben, I told you, right? Because in Skeptical Reef 2, I honored Carl Sagan by making a reef baloney detection kit.
Yeah.
And the what gives me hope for the hobby is there's other people in the world who don't know me and come up with the same kind of thing. We have to be careful of this marketing crap because it's marketing crap. It's not it everything written on the bottle is designed to get as many people as they think to the most amount of people to buy it. And so the marketing claims are often soft, and sometimes they get into stupid. The magic rock. Have you seen the magic rock come by on social media?
Mm.
That it's a bio media, but it's all magic claims. The surprising thing to me now is that they're actually being blatant and just saying that it's magic and not even bothering. And we know why I think people respond to that. Why, Jonathan? Why are they doing that? Why do you think?
So one, the hobby is big, or at least the market for these sorts of things is much bigger than maybe the group of people that we think of as the hobby. Okay, so it's not all conscientious, thoughtful reef keepers.
Exactly.
A lot of it is people who pick up a bottle and says, "Oh, detoxifies nitrates. I think I have some nitrates. Might as well grab one. What can it hurt?" Um, and that what can it hurt? That's the real sort of problem, because we have that attitude even within what I would say is the conscientious and more scientific minded um, segment of the reef community. We'll look at something and we'll say, well, I don't know, it doesn't seem to have any justification. I can't find anybody who's got any backing evidence for it, but it's not going to hurt anything, so I'll give it a try. Why not? Well, if you don't have some way to evaluate that claim, you really shouldn't be doing something just based on a why not.
And I think this is a good segue for me to say, Jonathan, who the hell are you and why should we listen to you?
Okay, fair enough. So my name is Jonathan Begnaud, and my real job is I'm a science educator. I teach high school physics mostly, and a mix of other things. In fish world, as my wife calls it, I like to do testing, and so amateur chemistry, I guess you could say. Not professional chemist. My degree is in physics, but I picked up a lot of chemistry along the way as I ran into some people who are like really, really good, really, really good. Like analytical chemists are like wizards, and when you see the sorts of things they can do, it's really kind of inspiring and magical. So anyway, so I've picked up a lot of things along the way, and I feel like a contribution that I can make to the reef hobby is to be able to look at a lot of these things that we have open questions about. Do we know if these things work or not, or how they work, and see if I can make some sort of contributions there. The thing that you've probably run across that I know has been mentioned a few times on this show is the whole mess with Vibrant. And that wasn't me alone, but some other people. I did talk to some other people, but I was the one who wrote up and put forward the data to demonstrate what it actually was.
So for people who don't know, Vibrant was a magic cure-all for algae problems that was pitched by a couple of companies, and it got kind of popular, even though people were saying, this makes all of my alarm bells ring. And then people started using it, and we got people who said it works great, but we also got a bunch of people who said, oh, it don't work so great for me. And we ended up with something I think we see a lot in the hobby, which is counting the hits and ignoring the misses. And that got people like Jonathan thinking, and they did some testing and some thinking and then presented a case. Now, it wasn't, I keep going back to like, I don't want to go to a me example. Dustin Dorton, when he put forward using, what is that animal pill that we use for red bugs? Interceptor.
Interceptor.
When he said, when he wrote up the thing, he didn't just say use interceptor. He said, this is what I've done. This is why. This is my supporting. This is why you should try this. And then you guys did the same kind of thing with the interceptor. You went, we tested this, we looked at this, we looked at this, and it's not what they say it is. And in fact, that blew up all over on Interceptor's on Vibrant's face, and but they're still there. Um, you know, they said they were a bacteria, right? That was the main claim.
Right. Yeah. So what they said was that this was a bacterial product that kills algae. They said it eats algae, it smothers it, various things. Yeah, and so it's a bacterial blend that kills algae. And my angle on it was I was actually looking at bacterial products at the time. I was looking at a bunch of hobby bacterial products, and we could talk about that a different time. And so I'd looked at lots and lots of them. The kinds of bacterial products I was looking at were the ones that are supposed to eat grunge and, you know, fix your organics and stuff like that. And when you look at all of them, what you find is they maybe are better than placebo or maybe not. You could never really point to anything that was super definitive except Vibrant. And so, like, why is this one bacterial product like so much obviously more effective and the thing, the killer that it's definitely not a placebo is it's killing even things you didn't want it to kill, like the Chaeto in your sump is melting, whether you wanted that gone or not. And so you could clearly see that this was certainly different. It made you think that it might not be a bacterial story. And so then when you had something else to compare it to and a few chemical tests, and then developed a few more chemical tests and took things to figure out over a really, really long time. It took me a long time because I'm not a professional chemist. Some other people would have taken a lot less time to get there. But anyway, and in the end result, ended up doing some fancy lab testing, and it was exactly the same as algicides that have been around for decades. There wasn't anything novel about it.
Did you do that with Craig Bingman, or did you contact Craig?
No, I didn't actually. I hadn't run across Craig or talked to him, or I didn't have any way of contacting him. But I did have some other, smart chemistry people that could advise me, like, does this make sense? That sort of thing.
Yeah, Richard, the reason I said that was because I thought I remembered when that came out that Craig was talking about that.
Well, everyone was talking about it. So everyone was talking about Vibrant, and most of us were going, yeah, there's something fishy going on. The most of the experienced reefers were going, I don't know what's going on there, right? But that's to your beef, Jonathan. That's not who people are marketing to. People are marketing to the new people in the hobby who are going to buy stuff. After a few years, actually, manufacturers don't really care about us anymore because we buy so much less stuff. But we were all talking about it, but no one bothered to do the work. So I think one of the reasons I'm so excited about the hobby now is we got people like Jonathan and Salem and Telegram
pushing back.
Because I got all bitter and I was like, I am tired of spending my own money to show that other people's products aren't good or they are good. Why am I doing their work for them and then taking shit from all sides for it afterwards? So I got, I don't want to spend any money. Fuck you. You do your own product. And now it's really exciting to see other people who are like, no. It makes me go, hey, Rich, remember when you were just interested and wanted to find out instead of, a bitter bitch?
Man, the creep what sticks in my head, the creepiest thing is a purposeful misrepresentation of what's in your product, dude. That seems like that should be illegal.
Well,
yeah. So it turns out that the end story of it is that they actually had to change their label. What was in it was an EPA registered algicide, and and the EPA in some form came and had a chat with them, and a whole bunch of lawyers got involved. And then, but the way those things work is we didn't find that part out until like a year and a half later. Like we didn't see the resolution to that until a year and a half later. And so there are some people who are like, oh, we haven't heard anything since the EPA came to look at them. So maybe you're wrong. But, you know, it's just those sorts of things, like on the legal side, take a really, really long time.
Yeah. So Jonathan is how do you explain that? Like John, all these people that I just mentioned before are hobbyists whose brains are engaged in the hobby as well, right? So they're excited about the hobby and they want to use their brains to figure out the puzzles that are bugging them. And they don't just kind of have to it. They do it and then they write it up, you know? And one of the reasons I was excited about having you on is because I've been on this kick about anti-siloing the reef hobby, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've got actual beef with Reef to Reef. You post on Reef to Reef, and so many of the communities have walls up. I think Reef to Reef has walls up, and I wish they would take them down. No matter how many conversations I have with David, where he tells me that he thinks I'm a good person, you're still doing the things, so that's fine. But I have decided that I don't care anymore. The information is more important than anything else. So I'm going to have no problem putting some links down on this episode to the Reef to Reef stuff that you publish so people can take a look at it. Because we have to knock down the silos. So, you know, because what we don't need is another group of people doing the same thing that you've already done without knowing that you've done it already. So we don't have to redo the same thing. Although replication is nice, we might as well keep moving forward rather than all moving at the same pace in almost the same direction, but never talking. All right, off that soapbox.
I mean, I'm easily entertained. We all know that.
This podcast is sponsored by saltwateraquarium.com, who have been with us for a long time. We used saltwateraquarium.com way back in the day when it was just Ken and his grandfather sitting in a shoebox by the side of the road trying to sell, you know, pipettes to passing reef keepers. Now they've ballooned into a giant, but not too giant company that supplies all kinds of good things. And one of the reasons I like them is because if I'm ordering something, if I order it by 11, it usually ships by about 1 o'clock that day, and I get it a couple days later or the next day because they have 3 facilities around the US to ship stuff from. Ben, what do you like about saltwateraquarium.com?
What I like about saltwateraquarium.com is they've got this app that you can get to on your phone, saltwateraquarium.com app, and it's all right there at your fingertips. Their whole thing is on there.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there's even, you know, shows you ways to pay, and it talks about, has videos and articles.
Yeah, so check them out. Use the link below. Let them know we sent you, not let us know we sent them. And we'll see you on the flippity flop. Saltwateraquarium.com.
I mean, I'm easily entertained. We all know that.
Okay, so while we're on Vibrant,
yeah,
let me show you something. I don't think you've ever had a chemistry demo on your podcast before.
Probably not.
And now I'm remembering the reason you've probably never had a chemistry demo is that, like you said, half of the audience is listening rather than watching.
Yes. I'll describe it too.
What I'm going to show you is the very, very short version that would have saved months and months and months of research and could have been done in our kitchen. Okay, so this is tap water, half a liter.
He's putting half a liter of tap water into a beaker on a real lab bench. So he said,
so like
he said
one
kitchen
worth of tap water, and this is Dawn dish soap. So like 5 milliliters or a teaspoon if you're in your kitchen doing this. And mix it up. You don't want it to foam. You just want it mixed. Okay. And gonna do 50 milliliters in here.
So 50 mil into another smaller beaker.
And so this is your test solution, and it's just Dawn dish soap. So this is just 15 milliliters of diluted Dawn dish soap in tap water. Now, if you add to it random reef stuff, so like tank water, nothing happens. So you could put a drop of tank water in and nothing happens. You could do the same thing with your favorite bacterial product, or with like chemical additives, your 2-part. And the most that you'll get is maybe a teeny tiny bit of
So Jonathan, he's just put a drop of Reef Fusion in, and before he put a drop of tank water in, and in the beaker, there's just the same bubbles you would see, not really frothy, but there's some bubbles at the top. But the drops of the solutions he put in has done nothing at all significant to the soapy water that's in the beaker, which I can't tell you how excited I am by the small amount that you put in. I'm expecting to see something here. I hope I'm not overselling it.
Okay. Yes. So you can do that with So it only takes 1 drop in order for this to work. So you could do that with your bacterial products or your tank water, or you could do it with your 2-part, any of your chemical additives, whatever. It's not going to do anything. It'll leave the water still pretty clear. However, if you take 50 milliliters of this and you add a drop of, say, algae fix, the properly labeled stuff.
Oh, 1 second, Jonathan.
Yes.
You made a new beaker of soapy water.
Yes.
What was the reason for the new?
So the new beaker of soapy water is so you can see what a drop of that does compared to what a drop of the nothing interesting does.
Perfect. So for people who are listening, most of the people listen to our podcast, the 2 beakers look the same, and there's a little bit of foam on the top of both of them. It's not really foam, just kind of bigger bubbles. And now Jonathan has taken Algae Fix. He's taking his pipette, and he's going to put a drop of Algae Fix into the soap mixture.
Yep. So you put a drop in, and it goes in, and you see a little bit of white stuff. And then as you swirl it around, the whole thing goes cloudy.
Yes.
Okay.
It's very dramatic.
So that works with any of this class of algicide. So it works with Algae Fix. You can also do it with another hobby product that is, this is Dino X. So Dino X, it says it's an algicide. It describes the chemical a little bit differently, but it's the same class of chemical. And so if you do a drop of that, you get the same result.
Okay. So this is the result that you, if we had known that this class of products does this, it would have been much more obvious at the beginning that that's what was going on.
Yes. So in fact, yeah, this would have saved a whole lot of time, and it only requires, Dawn dish soap for your chemical. And there's one more that I think is kind of interesting.
Okay.
And goes back to the product labels. So one more product that I want to show.
All right. He's doing a new beaker of soapy water.
Yeah. Okay. So this one I have cleverly disguised so you can't tell what it is, because what it is not actually super important. However, what is important about it is that it says it's not an algicide on the bottle, and then it says that it's safe for marine fish, hard and soft corals, other inverts, as well as macroalgae. So remember, not an algicide is what it says on the bottle. However, if you put a drop, you get the same reaction. And the reason you get the same reaction is because it's the same class of compound as the others. Now, this is described as an aquarium cleaner. It cleans your things. And it says it's a polymer, but it's actually really, really close. It's the same class of compound as the others. And so we should squint really hard when we read the claim that it is not an algicide or that it says it won't harm your macroalgae.
Right. Now, what else would cloud the water like that? But we tried a whole bunch of random things in the hobby already, and it didn't have the effect. Is there what else could it be that's doing that?
Yeah, that's the thing. There aren't other things in the hobby.
So that's fantastic.
So it's this class of compound. It's a cationic polymer, which means it's a big thing that has a positive charge, and what it's doing is it's reacting with the negative charges in the soap. And so it's hooking together to make big stuff in there that's big enough to see, which is why the water gets cloudy. And I've tried all kinds of things. Every different class of compound you could try in the hobby, hand sanitizer, things that have, anyway, no, there isn't anything else with any sort of hobby application. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that what's in there is the specific chemical that is in Algae Fix. It may not be. It probably isn't. I'm sure they have some. I'm not sure. I don't know why they say it's not an algicide on the label, but they say it's not an algicide on the label, and I don't know what their reasoning is for saying that, but I do know it's in the same class of compound, and people who've used it say that it makes their Chaeto and their salt melt as well. So,
well, I know why they don't want to say it's an algicide, because nobody wants to put an algicide into their tank if they know anything about what goes on with coral biology. Right. Meaning that there's algae essentially in the corals that you don't want to kill. So on one hand, I understand the balance manufacturers have to make, right, to make their product seem viable. I understand that that's a whole thing, and I understand doing it. But it seems like if you're going to be in the class, and I can see even them saying, well, it's not really an algicide, but saying that, it's in the class, it's in the same class as the other algicides, means it's really close to being an algicide. And if you had 3 cups of poison and one said it's not really a poison, but it's really close to the poison, but it's not, you probably wouldn't want to drink it.
What I was going to say is it's labeled as an aquarium cleaner to clean gunk algae, off of, your aquarium surfaces. And so what people expect it to do and what people to use it for is as an algae killer. And so it's also in that class of compounds. I've done a whole bunch of other, lab chem stuff, and I can't tell it apart. Maybe it's different, but it's different in some really small, subtle way, if it is different than those. So
go ahead.
So to bring it back to the beef, the things that are listed on these products, even things that have, fairly high stakes, if you say incorrect things about them, they're still not extremely trustworthy. And so we need to be much more skeptical about product claims that are on the bottle. And so, Dino-X is very clearly labels itself as an algicide, as, a polymer, and it tells you enough information to know that it's in that group of stuff. But it also suggests that it's somehow specific for dinoflagellates, but there's no reason to think that's true. So product claims, we need to think much more carefully about them, and don't take them as some sort of scientifically verified thing or even necessarily technical scientific information from the manufacturer. It's basically just advertising statements.
Yeah. And I think, and then I'll circle back to you, Ben. we'll circle back. It's our show. Um, um, the people think, first of all, people tend to think that our hobby is so small and we have such access to experts and scientists that there's no way in this hobby could something get through to marketing and not be vetted properly by smart people who know about reef tanks. And sadly, we're not special. We're just like any other industry. People going to try to sell stuff to make as much money as they can without caring about what actually happens, because their goal of the company is to make money, not to help reef keeping. And I'm not saying that all products are like that, but there is definitely room for that. The people selling magic rocks to help with your biological filtration, they're not trying to help you. They're most likely trying to move a bunch of crap from some other industry that they have in boxes already, that they don't have in boxes already, and they want to repackage it and unload it because it's just sitting there. And they can make a mind story that can kind of make it fit based on very high level or low level. I never am sure. Based on very light understanding of what goes on in our boxes. All right, I'm sorry, Ben. I talked way over you.
No, it's okay. A couple of things. One thing is how does any company put things in a bottle in any industry to sell them and escape? Well, I know how they escape the the attention of the government, because the government is very overloaded in watching this stuff. But I mean, that's maybe why they don't want to say algicide or whatever on there, because they don't want the scrutiny of some larger government entity. Like, okay, what's in there,
Mhm.
and then tied to that too, anything you put in a bottle, it seems like it has to have a MSDS sheet where because if your kid drinks, it's like, I need to know what the hell's in this right now. Poison control needs to know that.
Yeah, again, this is one of those things that it's a fail safe in our mind. We feel like, all right, this technical information on this label was written by technical scientific people, or at least it was written by lawyers who don't want to say things that could get them in trouble, or at least if there's anything dangerous, there has to be an MSDS sheet attached to it somewhere. Just a few years of hobby experience shows that none of those things are actually true, at least in some circumstances. So even for things that do seem to have like a legal bar to, you really have to say something about it, even those aren't always labeled accurately and correctly.
Yeah,
and then is there any way possible to affect nuisance algae and not touch Symbiodinium in the corals?
So
it's not that targeted, right?
So the maybe kind of, hopefully we don't know, because the Symbiodinium in the corals is a dinoflagellate. It's an algae, and it's another one of the nuisances that we don't like, and try to do all sorts of things to get rid of it when it's not in the coral. And so you're hoping that the coral tissue is sufficient to protect it, and it really regulates what can go in and what can go out. For some things that's true, for some things that's not true. We don't know enough to be sure. Some of those, so that list of compounds that I showed you, that list of products, the hobbyist reviews of them are all over the map in terms of, some of them say, this is actually pretty gentle, my corals don't care. And some of them, the hobbyists almost always say, it really ticks off the corals. So even, within that class of compound, it's hard to make predictions about complicated chemical things like that.
Shouldn't be legal, in my opinion.
Well, but then you get into, there's so many issues with this. If none of it's legal, all of our products become more expensive, right? One of the reasons,
jump the hoop.
If you're doing the food properly, the food has to be labeled, and that costs money. Or it's supposed to be labeled, but who's going to?
And I'm conflicted. And I'm conflicted about this too, because I want to be able to get access to something. If that algicide weren't available, I would be ticked off because I've used the labeled algicide that I knew what it was. And I wanted to, because, you know, it helps. Green hair algae is a never ending issue. And so same thing with antibiotics, to some extent, and things get gray here. So why are all of the things that are supposed to kill cyanobacteria? Why do they say remove cyanobacteria stains? I'm somebody who knows the legalities of what you can and can't say about what your product does, knows why those products say remove cyanobacteria stains rather than saying it kills cyanobacteria, because that's what we want it for, is to kill cyanobacteria.
You're right. I never thought about that, but you're absolutely right. Every time I've
there's a reason
those packages,
there's a reason I don't know the legality for what that reason is.
But you could say it kills the stains. Yeah, there's something there.
Removes the stains. I would bet you kills is an active word.
Yeah.
And that needs to be provable. But look, you know, you buy stuff for your kitchen and who the hell knows what's in that? You know, you're assuming they've actually killed bunny rabbits with it to prove that it's safe.
rubbed it on a rat's skin.
Yeah, this hobby is very strange in this realm because it's so cerebral in one sense, but I say it the same way, but it often stops at the hypothesis. The thinking stops at the hypothesis, and then the bandwagon is jumped on, and then it takes 10 years for people to go, oh yeah, that didn't really pan out.
And
meanwhile, the companies. I'm sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
Some things are always going to be a hard problem, like algae. Algae is always going to be a hard problem. And, you know, I think about it like in another sort of realm, and from a physics perspective, we're not going to have hover cars anytime soon. We're not going to have flying cars because gravity is never going to stop being a hard problem. It's always going to take a lot of energy in order to overcome gravity. It's always going to be really, really hard to have a tank that can support all the things we want to support and somehow can't grow algae. We're going to blast it with light. We're going to feed all of the good stuff into it, and somehow we're not going to grow algae. And so that's always going to be a hard problem. And so I don't even judge people who want to use an algicide. Just, you know, use something that says what it is and is very clear. But be on the lookout for people that say they have a cure for some problem that's always going to be a hard problem.
Yeah. So in the Reef baloney detection kit, I think it says, does this claim seem to go against the general wisdom of how we think things work right now? And so if it really sounds magical, you got to squint at it. And you really got to wait years for it to kind of filter through so we can say, look, we have enough anecdote now that it's not really that magical. And then people stop using. I mean, you know, it's not quite the same, but, you know, ultra low nutrient systems were the toast of the forums for a long time.
Zeovit.
And they're kind of gone now because it didn't pan out.
I mean, I'm easily entertained. We all know that.
Champion, lighting and supply. Champion, lighting and supply. Champion, lighting and supply. Who's the champion of lighting and supplies? It's Champion.
Lighting and supply. Here's a box. Champion Lighting Supply sponsors the show, and we are super happy to have them on board. Here's the main thing. Here's a box. I can't show you what they sent me because it's super secret. It's not really. I just don't want to show it.
Underpants.
But what I do want to show is this is how they pack my stuff. No plastic, no peanuts, recyclable paper, and often I'll just show you a little bit what was in the box. Ooh, a cord.
Wow.
And usually if they have enough boxes laying around, they have a machine that shreds the boxes. So this is a company that has good prices they know everything. They're on top of it. They are reefers as well as a company that has hard to find reef stuff and easy to find reef stuff. They're a great place, but they care. They actually put their money where their mouth is a lot. And they went, we don't want to pollute the environment by our hobby. And so they don't. So we think they're great. Champion Lighting, except for Colton, that guy. No. But Todd, yes. So check him out using the link below or some other link, Champion Lighting and Supply.
Champion Lighting and Supply.
I mean, I'm easily entertained. We all know that.
Jonathan, if you don't mind, can we, there's so much to talk to you about, but I want to talk about dinoflagellates because we almost never talk about dinoflagellates. And we don't talk about dinoflagellates because we don't run into the problem that often, even with all the tanks we set up. And when we do, what we kind of do is we siphon it out, we turn the lights off, we do a water change, what I call shocking the system, which I need a better thing, just changing the parameters somehow. We get sand stirs, and then we go on our way in a few weeks or a month, and it's gone, and it's just not a thing. It's become a thing for a lot of people. I think we understand why that is. We think it's probably got to do with rushing the setup and setting up with dry rocks and not letting the benthic succession actually succeed itself on its own. We're trying to get ahead of it and keep our rocks white and our sand white. So that's kind of where I think I don't need to speak for Ben. No, I totally speak for Ben. You just sit there, move your mouth, Ben. What Richard said is absolutely true.
I'm a puppet.
So while I want to talk about the nutrient stuff and the other stuff, you're right. When you sent me a note, we don't talk about it because we just deal with it. So tell us stuff about it. Or what?
Okay. So that's because y'all are smart. And you
fooled you.
So I like a puzzle. And I like a reef puzzle. And for a lot of people, dinoflagellates had been a puzzle and still is a puzzle. This is another one of those. It can be a hard problem because the dinoflagellates that we don't want are really, 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 really biologically close to the dinoflagellates that make our system run, which are in every coral. And so there's never going to be a magic cure that, a chemical you could put in that kills all the dinoflagellates and leaves your corals happy and alive. But so to think about dinos, a lot of people have put too much sort of emphasis in it. When you get dinoflagellates, it can worry you, and some of them are toxic. And there is a case for decisive, aggressive action against dinoflagellates, but it's a very, very narrow case. And most of the time, you're better off. A lot of time, you're better off not caring. And so, the way you just described, the way y'all think about it, and you just kind of don't worry about it, is a lot better for most people. Because what we found when we were trying to figure out things that could be done for dinoflagellates is that people would on the forum say, I did it, it's great, I got rid of my dinoflagellates. So how'd your corals do? They died. Okay, so that's not great. That means we're not doing things very well. And so in most cases, what you want to do are only conservative things, because a lot of people have done things to get rid of the dinoflagellates that are too aggressive and have done more harm than good. Yes, dinoflagellates are toxic, or some of them are.
Right.
And that's the very narrow case for when dinoflagellates need to be acted against quickly and aggressively. And that is if you have a kind that is in the water, that forms strings. So those two things are connected. The ones that are stringy They're stringy because they go into the water at night. They don't grow strings up from the surface. They attach out of the water. And
Okay.
so the fact that these are all things that we didn't know when we started microscope IDing, but now that we do know, you don't need a microscope to tell a lot of this stuff. If you see it form strings, then you know that it's attaching out of the water. So you know you have a kind that goes into the water for a significant portion of time, which means you have a kind that you can put UV on the system and you can zap it that way. If it attaches on corals, that's the narrow case for you need to do something very quickly, because toxic dinos that attach out of the water and attach on corals, the toxin that's in the dinos is quick enough that the corals will lose tissue the next day or 2 days. It's very fast when that specific thing is happening. On the other end of the spectrum, if the dinos that you have are sand bed dinos that are restricted pretty much exclusively to the sand bed, and let's say your snails aren't dying, then that means you have a low toxin variety that doesn't go into the water, and there's no reason to care about it whatsoever other than the fact that it looks brown and you don't like how it looks. So your action in that case should be, as much as you care, suck out the brown stuff, and that's about it. So if you look in the dinoflagellate guide, the large cell amphidinium, that's the kind that's on the sand. It'll show up brown. It'll get thought to be diatoms a bunch of the time. It's low toxin, sometimes not toxic at all. And feel free to not care about that whatsoever. It's also a kind that's hard to get rid of because it doesn't go into the water. So people that do chemical stuff against it, they're like, I've added a bunch of hydrogen peroxide and nothing's happening. It's because it's not going into the water. It's staying within its films in the sand. And at night, it even goes down into the sand a little bit. So that's why it doesn't get hit by UV. A bunch of the other types go into the water, some more than others. The kind that's the most responsible for toxins, for coral death, for snails and crabs and things like that, for cleanup crew death, is Ostreopsis. And the type of toxin that it makes is really close to palytoxin. And there's and that's a whole nother fun thing. But it's really, really close to palytoxin. The scientific papers that describe it talk about it as being a palytoxin analog. That ovotoxin, what's made by the Ostreopsis, is basically a palytoxin. So if it is on your coral, if it's attaching to your coral, things are going to go badly for the coral pretty quickly. So if you have a UV, run it, put it in the tank. So have it going from the tank back into the tank. Don't put a UV in your sump because that's too much turnover time, and people have found that doesn't work nearly as well as having it pull from and straight back into the display.
I'm going to add that. I'm just going to add in there that's for anything that you are trying to do directly in with your corals in your display tank. If you want a UV or bubbling or whatever, or filtering out ick, it's all in the tank. If you put it through the sump, you've made your effort, way less effective than it would be if it was where the problem is.
Yeah, people think that, their entire system is turning over however many times per hour. Great, but it's still a night and day difference between having something in that circuit that turns over however many times per day versus having it pull from the display and back into the display. Right. It's just a night and day difference.
Right.
Hell, I'm even thinking about that marine land filter that we do. Like if you had a dirty aquarium up top and you're like, well, I'm going to put it in the sump. That's not going to do shit. Yeah,
right. Exactly right. The polishing filter, you put it where you want it polished. Because if you don't put it there, it's not sucking from there. It's sucking from everything that's already settled. If you put it in the sump, all that stuff settles before it goes in the overflow. So you're not really getting as much of it as you want.
Well, like you and I talked about, like the fact that much of that detritus would even end up in the sump is a hope and a prayer.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm easily entertained. We all know that.
PolypLab, PolypLab. Where do you get your PolypLab? I know I grew up with that song every Sunday morning.
Really, at the Polyp
Bible
Lab
school.
Sunday school?
Yeah. Yep.
We are powered by PolypLab, and we thank them. Without, all of our sponsors, we wouldn't have all this stuff that makes us look pretty, apparently. But we also like a bunch of the products PolypLab sells. Here's one that I like so much. I love their Genesis BioBlocks because their form factor is small and thinner. It's just like less than an inch tall, and it's like 5 by 5 inches, something like that. And they don't break. You can't break them. They're really stiff, but they seem to be really doing a great job at holding bacteria, which is what you want out of a biomedia. Recently, I sent 2 of them across the country. Sent one to beefer Adam, and recently to Farhad, another beefer. And I talked to Farhad the other day, and he said a piece of advice about flow really helped him. But what he thinks has really helped his tank turn around or turn a corner or start really working was the inoculation of bacteria from my 1,000-year-old system. So that's a great use of these things that I think people are going to be doing more. I'll have to do testing to make sure I don't have poison in my tank before I send more out, but people are willing to take the risk. PolypLab, I really like that product a lot.
PolypLab.
Wherever good reef keeping gear is sold.
I mean, I'm easily entertained. We all know that.
Jonathan, why are people getting these dinoflagellate blooms? It feels, part of it feels to me like they just wait too long to act, because they're scared to act. When I've seen it, I kind of nuke it from space. It's like, oh, if I'm actually seeing them, I gotta do something now. I can't leave it all the same and like try little things for the next 2 months because it's just going to keep going. Is that part of what's going on, or do you think it's a dry rock kind of issue? And people, what do you? I can stop talking after the question mark.
Okay. Let me jump back to something that you already say that you do that's also really effective and goes along with the UV, and that is you do a little blackout. Okay. So some kinds want to go into the water. The Ostreopsis wants to go into the water. It's going to go into the water every night. Other kinds are somewhere in between. In the guide Prorocentrum and Coolia, they will go into the water. They kind of need some encouragement. And 3-day blackout is a strong encouragement for them to find another place. And so any cells that are capable of swimming will swim in that circumstance. So a short blackout doesn't even have to be 3 days, but more than 1 day. So a period of darkness long enough to shake up their cycle works really, really well with UV to make the UV more effective.
Got it.
So back to your actual question.
Go
ahead.
Will you remember? Because I just want to jump on.
Yes.
There's 2 other things that I remember that I've done for dinos before. I use that polishing filter, which should be the Marineland Reef Beef polishing filter. Have you seen it? It's a MaxiJet power head with a canister built right onto it, and you can run either like a carbon and a filter floss or a pleated Micron cartridge. And so I'll take that, put it on a magnet, stick it in the tank, stir everything up, turn off the flow to the sump, let it filter that stuff out. And my thought there is, I'm filtering out some of the dinoflagellates no matter what's going on, and some is better than none when I'm Hail Marying in a 5-day blackout.
And this is another thing you do that's smart that the million monkeys on the forums also stumbled across, and that is, so if you don't have a UV, the fact that they are forming strings on the corals, they aren't picking the corals because they like the corals. They are attaching to places that are high flow and have a lot of light. And so they just want to attach to anything. So you could do a poor man's UV if you want to, and hang some scratchy floss into a high flow section of the tank. So you could just like take a zip tie, take some filter floss, clip it in front of a power head. And if you have a kind that's going into the water and that's forming strings that's attaching out of the water, it will turn that thing brown in a few hours. And the timing is the morning. So during the night, more of them go into the water. And so during the morning, they tend to settle out. So from lights on to, like before lunch, you'll see the most accumulation on that. And so if you don't have a UV for a big tank, a big UV can be kind of expensive. You can throw some filter floss in there, and that'll keep the toxic dinos off the corals long enough to save your corals for a few days, while you try to get a UV in if you don't have a unit like that. So it's another trick you can use.
It's almost like a larval trap, right? You put the larval trap in at night, and the larval trap has a light on it, which attracts the larva to it. So I don't. So it's kind of like that, kind of.
Okay, so what I think I remember the question was, was why we're getting dinos more now, and
or is it just that that was a thing that people started wondering about, and then people started picking at it, and now it's just a big topic of conversation, or it has been. It seems to have dropped off a lot, and I'm sorry, there were forums on groups, dino, and now they seem to have faded some to the background. So maybe it's not, maybe it was just the time that became something to look at. Now I'll really shut up.
So the reason that there's more dinos now, I don't know if that's true or if it's a mind story. I once came up with a way. It was like, okay, so I'll go as far back as this form of data will let me go. And so what I did is I went through forums that had pictures, and I looked for the phrases brown algae and green algae. And so I went back through as far back as the forums still hold pictures, which let me go back to 2005 or so. And I looked at all the people that were complaining about brown algae. How many of those, what proportion would I, looking at them today, say that's dinos? Versus what proportion now of people saying, hey, I got a brown algae, what is this? What proportion is dinos? And it was the same as far, now I couldn't go back to like the 90s or anything like that, but at least to 2005, the proportion was the same. The difference was in 2005, 2006, you posted your brown slime and people said, oh, this is diatoms. And they're like, no, it's really, really slimy. They're like, oh, no, it's cyanobacteria. And that's the end of the thread. So that was like all the discussion there was. And then people started looking at this stuff through the microscope because there were some things that were making people's snails and crabs die and things like that. There were some things that were killing cleanup crews. And so then people figured out, hey, some of these are toxic, and that's dinos. So in that respect, it might not be more common, but I will tell you there's circumstances where dinos are much more common, and that is in an empty tank. If your tank is just a few coral frags and a whole bunch of open space, well, every nuisance is going to show up.
Right.
And the dinos are part of the uglies, the early tank uglies. And so in a lot of cases, rather than saying, oh no, I have dinos, you should say, I have the uglies. It's a new tank. Let it ride for a while and don't think about it. Don't think about doing anything super aggressive about it because it's just new tank stuff. And so that's, if you have a tank that's packed with coral, that's packed with, living tissue of corals and things like that, then the dinos don't really show up as much of a problem, which is why Ben and you don't run into that as much.
Yeah. So that's why, if I'm setting up a new tank, if I move and don't have a tank for 6 months, right, and I'm starting from scratch, I get a bunch of rock, I stick it in salt water, and I leave it there for as long as possible before I start my tank to let it become bacterially active with stuff I might want, with inoculations from people's tanks that I like. And so the bacterial turgor pushes everything out of it, right? It matures, it cures. Then I set up the tank and I put the stuff in it, and I keep the lights really low for a month or two as I start adding fish first and maybe some corals. I actually think with the way I just described, you could bomb the tank with animals right away. But because I've seen that go wrong, I would probably take a couple months and sneak up on it. People don't want to do that, and I understand that. But that's really, but then I see people fight cyano and dino and spend a ton of money on it for 4 to 6 months and have a really bad time. And it's like, well, if you just slow down, you'd get done with you. If you go to PT, your knee is going to heal. If you don't go to PT and you keep doing the thing that hurt your knee's just going to hurt forever. It's that kind of interesting thing. And I think everyone looking at it, I think it's very cool that people look at it. That's kind of the fun of the hobby for people with brains like yours and mine to a lesser extent than yours. I look at the philosophical side and then find people to help me with the practical chemical side. But the idea is we we should pick at the problems as much as we can, but we should be careful about jumping on solutions before we've actually shown that they're a solution. Because that's why dinos became exciting, right? It was like, oh, we don't know what's going on. And people are always like, I can help. I want to help. I want to be smart. I am smart. Let me help. And then we get all this attention, but then people start spinning off going, well, that one person said it worked for them, so I should do that, without kind of getting a more 30,000-foot view of what's going on.
But these are also the void spaces where companies are chomping at the bit to sell you something in a goddamn bottle.
Champing.
Champing and chomping. Champing and chomping.
No one chomps at a bit. They champ at it. But
You never seen me with a bit in my mouth.
that's
But yeah, that's absolutely true. And you have a rush of solutions to fill a void for a thing that is a hard problem, and so it's never going to become an easy problem, because remember, your tank is full of dinoflagellates just inside the corals, and you need to keep those alive. And so you have this sort of thing that shows up on the forum sometime, where somebody who has done research and is well read shares, look, here's what I did for dinoflagellates. And it's a 12-step process. And the reason it's a 12-step process is because they took a bunch of things from a bunch of other people that worked, and they put them all together.
right.
The problem is, they didn't think about, are these things pulling in the same direction? Are they working together at all? Are they pulling against each other? And there's no real trying to understand what the mechanism is behind a bunch of those things. And a lot of those things are, okay, so for dinoflagellates, we've got some things that are good, like 80% of the time it'll work. And then we have some other like 30 to 50% things that are in there. And there's a whole bunch of the 30 and 50% things. And some people think, well, let's just put them all together. That doesn't make a whole bunch of sense. You end up doing a bunch of things that pull against each other, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So make sure that what you have is something that actually requires some sort of action. And if it requires some sort of action, stick with the things that we feel good about. The 80% interventions, and leave the 12-step of things that maybe work and maybe don't. Just leave that stuff alone.
I mean, the crazy thing I think of is, because I'm always thinking in metaphors, they help me process stuff. But I'm thinking, like, let's say I want to get rid of black crickets in my yard. And so, the easy thing would be to spray the entire yard with gasoline. So that will kill black crickets. But then, me and a group of people with a black cricket problem are like, no, let's be more specific. So we would have to do research to figure out what is peculiar to black crickets that we could address, and get down into the science, some food that they and only they eat, and not the other beneficial things in the yard, to keep me from spraying the whole yard with gasoline. And you see how tricky it is to target specific types of organisms and not hurt anything else. That's very tricky.
And people have tried that sort of thing with nuisance dinos, and they've gone up the tree a million different ways and tried to see, okay, so is there something with the lighting? That's the big thing, because what's different now is lighting has changed, and it used to all be, dare I say, metal halide versus LEDs, and some people believe that has something to do with it. But if you do a lot of work and you get some nuisance dinos and you extract the pigments out of them and you look at the absorption spectrum of the pigments, it's the exact same as the dinos that live in your corals. There is no exploitable difference there between the lighting. So no, that's not a reason why you have dinos now when you didn't have dinos in your tank 20 years ago. It's not that you changed lighting. Because they have the exact same absorption spectrum. They use the light in exactly the same way. They want the same photons that the dinos in your corals do.
My God, I love the phrase "an exploitable reason," because that's the same thing that comes like when I talk about problem algae. It's, and people are talking about lowering phosphate and nitrate. It's like, no, because everything else needs it, and the 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 algae needs less of it than the things you want to keep alive. So if you lower it to the point that it hurts the algae, you've killed, you know, you yeah, you don't not feed the baby because you don't want to clean diapers. That's the metaphor.
And and if we're on nuisance algae in general, a lot of people think about the water nutrients. They think about their nitrate and phosphate, and they try to point to that as being the thing. But your water nutrients don't really, for a lot of cases, for a lot of outbreaks of nuisance algae, your water nutrients are not really the important thing. There's something local that's happening in a lot of cases. And there's a bunch of different drivers of nuisance algae. There's a bunch of different scenarios you could have where nuisance algae, where a cyanobacteria, something like that could grow. But in your tank where you have, this one spot in the corner where it grows cyanobacteria and the rest of the tank doesn't. Okay. It's not the bulk water. It's not your nitrates and phosphates. That's not what's going on. That's not what's driving the cyanobacteria. It's a local phenomenon. And most nuisance algae is a local phenomenon because it's really good at setting up shop there. It's really good at keeping nutrients there. Green hair algae can trap all kinds of junk in it and keep those nutrients pretty local. Cyanobacteria mats are fantastic at keeping nutrients recycled within the cyanomat. And so it tends to be a local nutrient phenomenon, and you can measure the water above it, but that's not really telling you much about what's going on.
Yeah, I've got cyano in a new tank I set up. All of these this is why I think benthic succession is the key to all of this. It's my shorthand for it. Let everything mature. Let all your surfaces mature and get bacteria that you want on them, covering them because they'll fight off the stuff you don't want. So I've got some cyano growing in the back, and I know what's going on and I know how to kill it, but I'm not going to. I'm just kind of leaving it and letting it do its thing. And I'm adding sand stirrers to see if anything has like a really punchy effect on it. But I know why it's there. You know why it's there? Because I've got light on the tank and there's not a lot of flow in the tank and there's not a lot of sand sifters on the tank and the sand is new. It's like, you've given it everything it wants. Mm-hmm. And how can you do that and expect it not to be happy?
Hey, Ben, I was going to tell you something right quick. You and I have something in common. My first sort of like product testing thing.
Co-equalizer.
So yes, that's where I'm going with this. I was also ripped a new one by Dr. Tim because I screwed up some things. So, well, let's put it this way. The first product that I did like a deep months-long test was one of Dr. Tim's products. And so I wrote up my stuff about it and I was feeling real great and it was there for months. And then something caught Dr. Tim's attention. He decided to respond to it and he completely ripped me. And my older, smarter, wiser friends were like, before you read this, understand it's going to make you really, really mad. You shouldn't respond and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And so there were a bunch of things that so a lot of things I was right about. Some things I would have tested differently than I did. But yeah, so you and I have that in common, Dr.
What
Tim.
do you feel like on the back side of that? Did you feel like he was totally correct or did it? Did you gain some respect from him or lose some respect for him?
So I knew that he was a smart guy and along, and nothing about it changed that. The I don't think I was okay. So the thing that he one of his criticisms of what I did was there isn't a positive control, meaning I couldn't find another product that did better than him. I didn't look for another product. I was just testing one product. And so that's what he was like, this isn't a good way to do it. You're just tearing down this one product, which means, you have an agenda and all sorts of stuff, which wasn't really true. But but I hadn't yet looked at a bunch of other products. And
he would have thought you were paid by a
and he was right.
company.
His product, other products are not necessarily better, but I don't think any of them are that great that do that kind of thing that I was looking at. So anyway.
Two things. One, he's wrong. If he wants to test doing what you did, but comparing a lot of products, there's nothing wrong with his hands, right? You did the work that you did because you wanted to do that work. For him to complain that you didn't do what he wanted you to do, or he would have done,
balls in his court,
is not fair, in my opinion. And the second thing is, if Snowman uses any of that story, is that okay with you, or would you rather?
That's totally fine.
Fab.
It's totally fine to use any part of this,
because that's Reef Beef right there. That piece, and I like Tim every time I've talked to Tim. But I feel the same way about the products that you do. Every time I've used them, I go, meh. Most bacterial products, meh. I don't know why I'm doing this.
Right. Yeah. They help a little bit. Is it placebo? Is it better than placebo? I don't know.
But that's why I've fallen back to not using things in a bottle for the bacteria in a bottle. None of them. Yeah. I do the freaking PolypLab Genesis block. I put it in some of my nice reef tanks. When someone wants to set up a nice reef tank, I just put those blocks over because I know that thing's doing its thing.
Yeah. And what makes me down on the products is I feel that way after having looked at them and done like detailed measurements for like a year looking at these things. And if after looking really closely at them for a year, I can't tell the difference between them and placebo, that doesn't make me think that they're all that necessary.
What's the point? Ben, what else you got? We're going to have to wrap up.
No, I think that's right. This is such a tricky hobby because like the companies want you to make it think it's easy and that they have something in a bottle to help you out of your problems. But, more experienced aquarists will just like, this ain't a hobby for 1 to 2 years. This is sort of like a lifelong endeavor hobby. And it sucks because people see a TV show or a picture and they're like, oh, I want a reef aquarium. It's like, this is a very involved hobby, and bottles of magic bullshit isn't going to get you there. It's the understanding of the processes that will help you deal with stuff. And like Richard says, and what Jonathan says, is like, often you may find out, if you're a noob, you think you're always got to get something to do something to something. But the answer sometimes is sometimes you just wait it out.
Jonathan, is there any last words you want to have on this episode? Because we're out of time. From our perspective, that's been awesome discussion, and we really appreciate it. You have any final things you want to get out of your head before we close up shop?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you a completely unrelated thing right quick. So my tank is always an experiment. It never really looks great because it's mostly an experiment. And so I'll show you the experiment that's going on in the tank right now. So I've got those little starfish we call Astorina stars. Somebody corrected me. They're actually not that. We've been calling them the wrong thing the whole time. Yeah. They're Aquilinastra. I think it was Aquilinastra.
Aquilinastra, okay.
But we'll call them Astorina stars, and we'll put our finger quotes around it so people know what we're talking about. And some people say they eat corals, and some people say they don't. And I feel really confident that they've been eating the coral, specifically the zoanthids, in my tank. And so I got some zoanthid frags because my previous colonies of zoanthids had been munched completely by these things. And then I got a shrimp, and then the shrimp went away, and then I had the Asteroides come back. So anyway, I got a few more frags of zoas, and the Asteroides are there. And so what I did was I made a little exclusion cage. So I took a little like water bottle, cut it out, and put a net around it, and did a little exclusion cage around one frag at a time. And so I would look at how one frag does when it's protected, when the stars are excluded versus when they're not. And then I remembered, actually they already make stuff like that. So here's so there's your little, box, and the zoas in there are doing much, much better. And then the zoa down there is like practically gone. It doesn't have any open polyps anymore. And so over time, I rotated them out over like a month. And so and so I made a chart. It's not completely done, but it's pretty close. So I made a chart of what when the polyps were increasing and when the polyps were decreasing compared to when it was covered and when it wasn't protected. And so if we look at that chart, I think the data is pretty persuasive that at least my Asterina stars are totally munching two of the three zoophags. One of them they don't care about very much, but the other two they think are really delicious.
Yep. We can put the there's a graph here, and I see it.
Yep.
The other thing I want to throw in, maybe you've considered this already, is the idea that there are different species of the starfish. Because I know I saw one, I've got pictures of it somewhere next to another one, and they were like darker or blacker or redder, and those ones seem to be eating stuff, and the ones that were lighter to this day don't seem to be eating stuff in my system.
Yes, I've heard that explanation. I heard it while this process was going on. I think it was Dong Zhao that I heard talk about it. And he said that the ones with red on it seem to be coral eaters. That seems to be what's happening in my tank. I don't know if it's a chicken and egg thing because a lot of things will take in pigments from what they eat. So maybe when I got them, they were gray and black. And after they start munching the zoas that they like, then they start getting the red. I don't know. But mine definitely seem to be munching my corals, and they are red and black. They do have a little bit of red into the gray with them.
It's fascinating. I love that a large part of making something useful to this hobby is bothering. And then bothering to follow it up. And you do both of those things, and I think it's great. So I think now whenever anybody says, whenever anybody says that these starfish aren't harmful, a lot of people I know always say some of them aren't harmful. Sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. But now we can definitely go, nope, Jonathan did the experiment. The ones he had were definitely harmful. So I think that's a useful step for sure. Well, Jonathan, I can't thank you enough for being on. This was really fun and informative, and it's great to finally talk to you in person and get a face to all the names that I have for you. Ben, any final comments?
No. No, I was still mulling over everything we were talking about.
Yeah, it's a lot today.
No, just like we show here and like we show on the show all the time, just sort of demand more evidence. And if you have the wherewithal, try and experiment. Try to put some data to conjecture.
Yeah. And Jonathan, Jonathan is very similar to me before I got a job in public aquaria, except Jonathan has way more analytical science than I do. And why do I say that? I was the same jackass I was the day after I got the job at public aquarium that I was before, but somehow, weirdly enough, I got that job and somehow people listened to me more. And that's just a weird thing. And what I would say to everyone who's listening or watching, what you have to contribute is useful, and we want it, and it is helpful. And the more thorough you are, and the more you write it up, and the more you check yourself for is it a mind story, the more useful whatever you are working on is going to be. So, I encourage everyone to do some work and help contribute to the hobby because everyone can do it. Even if you just have an idea how to do it or what you want done, but you don't know how to do it, there are plenty of people that will help guide you through experimentation and how to make your experiment more robust. And even get to the point where they tell you, yes, this isn't robust, but we're not at the point yet where it needs to be robust. We just are checking our hypothesis here. That's a great thing to do. So please, everyone do it. Just don't half do it because the half do it is a half cocked and that doesn't help anybody. And it sends us down roads where we end up with nothing.
And don't get super upset when your hypothesis is shown to not be fruitful because that's science. You don't get emotionally wrapped up and you thought a thing and then it gets sort of disproven. Don't get emotional about it.
Yeah.
You've just sort of clicked off something that isn't true, which is still fine.
Yeah. And all the things like and share, that always helps. But we're more importantly, we just want to, if you tell us in the comments if we're wrong about everything. Not Jonathan. Jonathan's right about anything. But and also, if you really want to make me happy, talk about my appearance in the comments because that's or the tone of my voice. That makes that always is wonderful.
Yeah.
Because I can totally do something about all that. If you are listening and you've gotten this far, thank you very much. We have a Discord. Ben, why don't you tell about that?
We have a Discord, which is a place on, like, you know what Discord is. Come on. And if you don't, just Google it. You have Google. So it's like, it's not a forum, but it's just a place where online we all group together and it's like an ongoing conversation. It's not archivable. You don't, just ask your question in the appropriate channel. And it's just a bunch of happy, helpful people there. It's great. It's done wonders for me as well. I go on there and ask questions on my own Discord.
Yeah, me too. And there's a public section, which is great. And then there's a paid section, which is greater because I feel like we've moved away from the idea that public forums are really great places for discussion. And we like to have people who have some skin in the game. We get less people coming through and dropping bombs. Yeah. Anyway, whatever your thing is, if you like the show, we certainly appreciate you. If you support the show, we certainly appreciate you. If you put comments, we appreciate you wherever those comments are. Thank you so much for watching. And this show is powered by PolypLab. It is sponsored by saltwateraquarium.com and Champion Lighting and Supply. And the words to leave you with this week are, he dead and I'm going fishing. Have a good weekend. Maybe this will be a lanyap. It'll be a little extra bit that Snowman will put in.
Yeah, sure. Use whatever of it you want to or don't want to.
Great. Yeah.
What a sexy man. I'm Apollo, the sun god.
Well,
my little Easter egg is, I wonder if anyone will see the squirrel
Yeah,
head.
the thing is, you can't mention them. I think for Easter eggs.
Yeah.
They're no fun if you tell people about it.
That's like if you have an Easter egg hunt and you're like, I wonder if anyone will see the golden egg right there.
We'll mention Machna at some point.
Yeah.
Because of my shirt, by the way.
Oh my God. You did get a shirt for it?
I got a shirt for it.
The Machna that would not be.
The Machna 2024 shirt, motherfucker.
Should I call a ambulance?
I see, man. No, fucking, you just take the compliment, bitch. This is an anti-beef right here.
Oh my God, what the hell is that? Oh, it did a cool
yiggle.
It did. I mean, I'm easily entertained. We all know that. But anytime that a bottle placed on a solid surface does like a little, sort of like a Hawaiian hula dance, that's what sort of thing that I'm into. Because he has no video either yet.
Yeah.
Unmute.
There you go.
Oh,
look at him.
I'm not going to shut up. I mean, I'm going to say I'm going to shut up, but I don't ever shut
You
up.
gotta shut up to drink your caramel flavored soda water. Oh my God, please make it end.
D.
I'm not the chemist here, but potassium peroxide sounds,
Hydroxide.
hydroxide sounds that it could be vicious.
Yeah, that's why I haven't really talked about it so much.
Vicious.
But I want you to get some because you have little children, and I think that's
You want me
funny.
to screw up my most popular aquarium?
Yeah. No, I want you to put it in your children's eyes.
Cereal. Yeah.
But no, on the content wise, and I'm half kidding. We just want to talk to you guys if you have something to say. You people, not guys, and you're not a dick. You're an asshole because everyone has one. I know. I'm being
Pedantic.
exist to people who don't have anuses, but we're gonna pretend that that's a super rarity.
Coalition against anuses are going to be sending us.
Yeah. I know. No, if you have a colostomy bag, that's your asshole. Okay, great.